A Tajik pilot and 3 Americans were flying a jet over Kazakhstan in 1994. Something appeared outside the window. It was brightly lit, moving fast. And then it did something no aircraft built by any nation on Earth can do. It made a 90-degree turn at full speed. Then it did a corkscrew, and then it circled them. The pilot filed a report. The Americans filed a report. The U.S. Embassy in Tajikistan sent a cable back to Washington. That cable sat in a classified file for over 30 years. On May 8, 2026, it was released to the public. And it is one of the more straightforward cases in the batch. Subscribe to Space Aquarius and let's begin. Let's start with what these files actually are because that matters before anything else. On May 8, 2026, the Pentagon began releasing what it described as a new batch of never-before-seen documents related to unidentified anomalous phenomena, the government's current term for what most people still call UFOs. The release came directly from President Trump, who had been teasing a major document dump for months. He announced it on Truth Social with a message that ended with the words, "Have fun and enjoy." The collection was built through an interagency effort involving the Pentagon, the Department of Energy, NASA, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the FBI, and the White House. It included 161 total records, 82 from the Department of Defense, 56 from the FBI, 12 from NASA, 8 from the State Department, 28 video files, 14 image files. A new Pentagon website was set up to host the documents. The design had a deliberately retro feel, black and white military imagery, typewriter-style font, like something out of a 1950s government archive. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth called it an earnest commitment to unprecedented transparency. The files reflect cases the government considers unresolved, not cases where they found an answer and buried it. Cases where, for a variety of reasons, they genuinely could not explain what was seen. That distinction matters, because what is in these files is not proof of alien life. But it is proof that something has been happening in the skies over this planet for decades that the most powerful military and intelligence apparatus in human history cannot fully account for. Let's go through the cases that stand out. The Kazakhstan cable is a good place to start because it is so specific. A U.S. Embassy cable from 1994 sent from the American mission in Tajikistan describes a joint flight over Kazakhstan involving a Tajik pilot and 3 American personnel. During the flight, an object appeared. It was described as brightly lit, moving at what the witnesses described as great rates of speed. And then it began maneuvering in ways that no conventional aircraft can replicate. 90-degree turns at speed, without slowing down, then corkscrews, then circles. The witnesses were not civilians. They were trained aviators and intelligence personnel. People who know what aircraft look like. People who know what weather balloons look like. People who know what satellites look like. They did not know what this was. The cable was classified, filed away, and forgotten for 30 years. Now move forward to 2023. A military report from the Aegean Sea describes a UAP flying just above the surface of the ocean. Not high altitude, not in the clouds, just above the water. And it was making multiple 90-degree turns at an estimated speed of 80 miles per hour. 80 miles per hour at the surface of the ocean, making sharp right-angled turns, with no visible propulsion system, no exhaust, no rotor wash, no sonic boom. The report is in the files, the explanation is not. Then there is the Apollo 11 case. In a 1969 debriefing of the Apollo 11 crew, astronaut Buzz Aldrin recalled spotting several unusual sights during the mission. He described a sizable object close to the moon. He also described a fairly bright light source that the crew felt could be a laser. Now, Aldrin has spoken publicly about this over the years. He has been careful and measured in how he describes it. He does not claim it was alien. He says it was unidentified. But here's what matters. This was not a civilian report. This was a NASA debriefing, a formal, classified document. The crew of the most famous space mission in history describing something they saw near the moon that they could not identify. That document is now public, and the object remains unidentified. The Apollo 17 photograph is in the files too. A NASA image from the 1972 mission showing 3 dots in a triangular formation above the lunar surface. The Pentagon's accompanying caption states that there is no consensus about the nature of the anomaly. A new preliminary analysis conducted as part of the file review process indicated that the formation could be a physical object. Not a camera artifact, not a lens flare, not a processing error, a physical object in triangular formation above the moon in 1972. One of the more recent cases involves a U.S. intelligence official who was conducting a search by helicopter. During the search, the official encountered what the file describes as a super hot orb hovering over the ground. The orb traveled approximately 20 miles at high speed. Then the official spotted 4 or 5 more orbs that flared up and down. This was not a historical case. This was last year. A sitting U.S. intelligence official on an active operation encountered multiple unidentified objects displaying behavior that no known technology can replicate. That report is in the files. The explanation is not. Now let's talk about why scientists still do not have answers, because this is the part of the story that most coverage skips over. The easy assumption is that the government knows what these things are and is hiding it. Maybe. But there is a more uncomfortable possibility. Maybe they genuinely do not know. Sean Kirkpatrick, a physicist and former director of the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the office specifically created to investigate UAP, reviewed the released files and said something that should give everyone pause. He said there is nothing unexpected in the release. And then he said something more important. He said that without analysis or context, the release will only serve to fuel more speculation, conspiracy, and armchair pseudoscience. That is a serious scientist who spent years inside the classified UAP investigation apparatus, saying that the files as released are not enough to draw conclusions from. And he is right. Here is why. Most of the videos in the release show small, ambiguous dots moving above landscapes in Iraq, Syria, and the United Arab Emirates. Some streak across the screen in less than a second. Others glide slowly. The objects are distant, the resolution is limited. The sensor data that would tell you the object's actual size, speed, and altitude is either redacted or absent. Mick West, an independent researcher and UAP skeptic who has spent years analyzing military UAP footage, looked at the release and said there is nothing really interesting so far. His words, more dots, more parallax. Parallax is what happens when a camera moves and a distant object appears to move in a way that looks unusual, but is actually just an optical effect of the camera's motion. Most UAP videos, when analyzed carefully, turn out to be parallax effects, sensor artifacts, or distant conventional objects that look strange because of the limitations of military infrared cameras. But not all of them, and that is the problem. Because buried in the noise of ambiguous dots and sensor artifacts are cases like Kazakhstan, like the Aegean Sea, like the Apollo 11 debriefing, cases where the witnesses are credible, the documentation is formal, and the behavior described is genuinely outside the performance envelope of any known technology. Those cases do not go away just because the easy ones have explanations. The Saul Foundation, a research group focused on UAP, called the release a meaningful step toward transparency, but pushed for legislation that would force a thorough review of all classified UAP records. Their executive director and a retired rear admiral said publicly that many more steps need to be taken to bring an end to decades of secrecy. Representative Anna Paulina Luna of Florida had demanded 46 specific UAP videos identified by whistleblowers. Those videos were not in the May 8th release. The Pentagon said they will be released later. Representative Tim Burchett of Tennessee thanked Trump for keeping his word, but reminded the public that transparency will not happen all at once. So here's where things stand. The government released 161 records. Some of them are genuinely interesting, most of them are ambiguous. The cases that are hardest to explain are the ones with the least data attached to them. The 46 videos specifically requested by Congress are still classified. And the scientists who have looked at the release say that without proper analysis and context, the public is no better equipped to understand what these objects are than they were before. That is not a conspiracy. That is just the reality of how classified information gets released. Slowly, incompletely, with the most sensitive material held back until someone forces the issue. The question is not whether the government is hiding something. The question is how much they are holding back, and whether the next batch of files, whenever it comes, will finally include the cases that the people who have seen the classified records say are the ones that genuinely cannot be explained. Because those people exist. They have security clearances, and some of them have been trying to tell us about it for years. If this video got you thinking, subscribe to Space Aquarius so you do not miss the next release breakdown when it comes. Leave a comment and tell me which case from the files you find hardest to explain. And share this with someone who thinks the UFO conversation is not worth having. The files say otherwise.